Hi everyone, this is Fake Life, and this is the Week 1 wrap-up for the Mister Hadwick Championship Invitational Season 2. I'm going to go over all the matches that have been played, I'm going to go over the next week matchups, I'm going to go over level ups, players that have died, all that good stuff, and we'll keep doing this week after week till the tournament's over. So in our first week, everybody got in their games, and it was 4 wins and 4 losses, no draws. And it was a particularly brutal week where a lot of players had a really rough time, as you can probably tell looking at the team values here. But enough of that, let's jump into the teams right now. Here's the results for week 1. We have Set Must Die, who's IB, and his Wood Elves beat Max Milgram's Orcs 2-1. We had Arya also playing Orcs. He beat Phelia's Dark Elves 2-0. Next we had the Grant playing Amazons. He beat JC McGraw's Wood Elves 1-0. And finally we have Nithon's SKVN team beating Visarius' Humans 2-1. So let's take a look at the individual teams, starting with IB's Wood Elves. IB won his first game, and for a Wood Elf team, he actually came out in really great shape. He's got a lineman down here with a miss next game, and that's the extent of the damage. He's got a War Dancer level up coming. Presumably if it rolls normals, it's going to be Strip Ball. If it rolls doubles or a stat up, he has more decisions to make. And he earned enough money in his win to be able to buy the Apothecary, which is what the Wood Elf team is really looking out for in that first game. So, great news for him, and Wood Elves are one of those teams where those early games without an Apothecary can really make or break you. So, I think he's already off to a pretty great start in this league. I would happily take this team after one game in a league. He's in a good spot. Next, we have Nithon's SKVN team, and it's, for the most part, a pretty similar story to IB. For a SKVN team, he came out relatively undamaged. He's got a Gutter Runner with a miss next and a lineman with a miss next, which isn't the best scenario in the world, but, what are you going to do? He did get 2 level ups on Gutter Runners, which is a really great start. And one of them got Block and one of them got Wrestle, which is exactly what I would have done in the same position. You kind of want to split up your Gutter Runners and give about half of them Block and about half of them Wrestle, is what I see most people do. He also managed to get enough money to buy his Apothecary, so he doesn't have to worry about that problem. And he's off to a good start. He's won his first game. He's got points on the pieces he wants points on. He really needs to get some SPP on the Storm Vermin before it gets to be too late. But you can't complain too much when you win your first game with Rats and walk out with no permanent injuries and a couple of Gutter Runner levels. So, good first week for Nithon. Next, we will look at Arya's Orc team. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name. So, Arya won his first game and managed to pick up Dodge on a Blitzer, so he rolled doubles for that, and Block on his throwers, so 2 levels, and after the win, he has enough money. He's going to be able to buy his Apo whenever he comes in and decides to do that. That's pretty much a best-case scenario, coming out of your first game with a couple of levels, no injuries, and able to actually buy all the stuff you wanted to do. He inflicted a number of injuries. I know he actually was on the giving end of quite a few injuries, so that certainly helped his SPP. This team looks great so far. I mean, there's no complaints here. I would say he's got a really great chance in future games. There's no concerns at the moment. So, having a good tournament so far, and I expect him to probably keep doing well. Next, we have the Grant's Amazon team. He is our final winner today. He won his game 1-0 over the Wood Elf team, and came out of it without any levels. And he has one line woman who actually has a permanent injury. There's a broken neck, which means -1 agility. So you'd think that that's going to be removed at some point. That piece is going to have to be replaced. I want to say he also lost another piece, and I think it may have been a Blitzer. Yeah, he actually lost a Blitzer in his first game. So that's where all of his money went. Obviously, very unfortunate to lose an Amazon Blitzer in game 1. And he replaced it, so there's some upside to it. He actually had just barely enough money to replace it, presumably since he has 0 treasury. Um, Other than that, it could have been worse. I know he was actually playing a Wood Elf team in his first game, JC McGraw's team, so it's you don't expect to come out of that with 2 permanent injury or dead players, but I mean the fact that he had money to replace that one player certainly helps him a lot. It's not the most ideal start, and of course he didn't get any levels on his players because the SPP got spread around fairly evenly, but he's still doing fine, I would say, at this point. So now let's get to our 4 players who lost their first game, and our first one is in Phelia, the Dark Elf coach. So he probably took the worst beating of any of the teams in week 1. We were just talking about a Wood Elf player getting 1 permanent injury and a death. As you can probably tell looking at the numbers, this Dark Elf team suffered a dead blitzer, a dead lineman, and a permanent injury on another lineman, which is a armored down here. He only got the 1 SPP for a vanity pass and some MVP SPP, which thankfully went on a player that didn't die. That's a very, very rough start. He fortunately still has his Witch Elf intact, but losing a Dark Elf blitzer this early is always really, really bad. He's gonna have his work cut out for him. Sometimes you have rough opening matches, and this was one of them. He had his Orc matchup first, so this is one of the 2 bashier teams in the tournament, both of them being Orc teams, and he's already gone through one of them, but it did some damage. We'll have to see what happens. He's going to be running with a slightly weaker roster with not all the positionals he wants, but on the plus side, Dark Elf linemen and even Dark Elf loners are pretty decent. Stat line of 6.348 is nothing to be too upset about. Obviously, loner's annoying, but you can deal with that. We'll see. He's going to be in kind of a recovery mode for the next couple of games at least, but we'll see if he can manage to get back into the groove and get all these players he needs back. Next, we have Max Milgram's Orc team, and this is not an Orc team that looks like it just played a Wood Elf game. You will notice a gap where a blitzer might be. That's because he lost a blitzer, and in addition, he's got 2 players with missed next games, a Black Orc and another blitzer. So it's even the players he really wanted to not get injured. And even more unfortunately, the dead blitzer also picked up the MVP, so that's a pretty horrible start to a season. As you can see, his team value is going to be at 750 for the first game, and presumably his treasury is going to be going to buying an apothecary, which will bump him back up to right at 800. Once he gets the Black Orc and the blitzer back, it's going to be a little bit more bearable. Losing a blitzer in the first game is pretty bad, but as we've seen and as we're going to keep seeing, there have been a lot of painful games with a lot of deaths and injuries in them, so he's not the only one suffering right now. Very tragic to lose the MVP, but still recoverable. Fortunately, these 2 missed next games are just missed next games. There's no other injury attached to them, so he'll come back in the week after this with just a blitzer missing, presumably, and maybe he'll be able to win his game and buy it back. Maybe he'll have to wait another game, but ugly first game, but not out of it yet by any stretch of the imagination for sure. Next is Viserys' human team, and unlike all of the other teams that lost, and unlike most of the other teams in the league, no injuries. He's fine. He managed to get block on his thrower. I don't see any dead pieces around. And he got his re-roll, but it looks like he rolled probably close to the minimum on his roll for money, so unfortunately he's not able to buy his apothecary after the first game, which means the second one is also going to be a little dicey. Thrower ate up a touchdown and an MVP. He got a couple of injuries on his blitzers, so despite the fact that it was a loss in his first game, this is the kind of loss you want to take. No permanent damage. Get some good SPP. Like I said, not getting much money is a little unfortunate, but you could be a whole lot worse off after losing your first game. I don't think he's going to have any issues going into game 2. And finally, we have JC McGraw's Wood Elves and the final death of week 1. JC McGraw lost one of his linemen. You know, not the end of the world for an elf team. You'll play with a loner lineman for a little bit. The more unfortunate part is, once again, not enough money in the treasury to buy that apothecary before game 2, so next game's gonna be kind of dicey. Other than that, of course, as you would expect from a team that lost not too much SPP going around. I know he didn't score in his game. He played against the Amazon team. That's the Grant. And he managed one Vanity Pass SPP, and he got 5 points on another lineman, which isn't where you want it to go, of course. But, you know, he's got a very risky second game coming up. No apothecary once again. He escaped the first one mostly unscathed, except for this unfortunate gap where a lineman used to be. But he's got one more game that he's going to have to worry about a little bit before he can get an apothecary and feel a little bit more safe fielding this lineup. And let's wrap up with my predictions for next week, which are going to be done from a still screenshot I took earlier because a couple of our guys have gotten excited and played their game already. So first we have Arya versus IB, that is Orcs versus Wood Elves, and it should actually be a really close game. Both of these guys won and came out with all their players. I would say the Orc team has more level ups than the Wood Elves, so I would give a very slight edge to the Orc team, but I expect this to be a really good game, and I expect it very easily could go either way. The next one is JC McGraw's Wood Elves versus Max Milgram's Orcs. And both of these guys lost their first game. And, Max Milgram lost 3 of his players for this game. One of them's actually dead, and 2 of them are temporary injuries. And compare that to JC McGraw's team, where he lost a lineman, and he's just going to have more of the players he actually wants on the pitch. It's actually very unfortunate for Max Milgram because it was all good players. It wasn't linemen and little niceties like that. It was all blitzers and black orcs. So I'm going to give the advantage to JC McGraw on this one. But Max Milgram should be able to bounce back after this game and actually have his players back, and hopefully things will go better for him. We'll see, maybe he can pull it out. The third game is Viserius' Humans versus Phelia's Dark Elves, and the Dark Elf team coming into this game is honestly just trashed, and the human team is not. So you have to give the advantage to Viserius' Humans. Phelia's got a uphill battle for the next couple of games, and I think it's going to be really rough for the next, at least 2 games. But we'll see what happens. I would bet on Viserius. And for the last match, we have Nithon versus the Grant, and that is SKVN versus Amazons. And it's a lot like the matchup with Arya and Set Must Die. Both of these guys came out, relatively healthy, and SKVN came out with 2 levels, and the Amazons didn't have any. So, give the slight advantage to the SKVN team, I would say. But again, it should be a pretty close match. And that is all I've got for the Week 1 wrap-up of Mister Hadwick Championship Invitational Season 2. Stick around. We're going to be back in a week with the Week 2 wrap-up. Hopefully we're going to be able to broadcast some of these games on the stream. And that's it. I've been Fig Life. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.